Welcome to Dadsplaining, a weekly chronicle of all the weirdest, messiest, grossest, and funniest parts of fatherhood, hosted by two first-time dads. I'm Jesse.
And I'm Brandon.
And you are listening to episode 7 of the Dadsplaining podcast. Before we get started, Brandon, how's your week been going with Noah?
Well, I want to kick things off by just saying we're recording this right after Father's Day. So this is the first Father's Day for both of us. So congrats to you, Jesse.
Yes, and happy belated Father's Day to you, Brandon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. We had a good time. Nothing super special, but just being with someone who is your son and like being a father, that was a pretty weird trip.
Yeah.
Doesn't really sink in yet, but it feels good nonetheless.
Oh, yeah, totally. So, story time.
Yeah.
So last week we had a scheduled family trip to Seaside, Florida. Something that we had been planning for months with
very nice.
With Ashley and my wife and my son David and my in-laws. And last Saturday, packing up for the trip, my wife was walking in the garage, slipped on some oil, fell, and broke her kneecap.
Oh boy.
And this was the day that we were leaving for Florida.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So we went to urgent care, put her in a brace, got her some crutches, and the nurse was like, "You might as well go to Florida because
why not?
All we're going to tell you to do is keep your weight off of the knee, and you can do that on the beach."
On the beach,
So-
in a chair, from the balcony.
Exactly.
In a caboose. With a moose.
All right, Dr. Seuss.
That's right.
So we ended up going and had a pretty good time. I mean, it rained the whole time anyway, so it's not
Florida,
like we could have gone
yeah.
out much. But still had a good time. It was David's first beach trip. More on that later. But coming home from that was Father's Day weekend. So Ashley being in the knee brace wasn't a whole lot that we could do in terms of planning something, cooking something, getting extravagant gifts, that kind of thing. So we just took it easy. I got, and I know you got the same gift, and we're going to post some pictures on our Facebook page so you can check them out. These amazing custom socks with my son's face on mine and Brandon's son's face on his. And these were thought of, I think, independently by our wives. I think they are just that much in sync at this point.
Yeah, I think my wife, Austin, has just been thinking about these ideas, and she came up with the sock idea, and then she started sharing it with everybody. And the best part is that she shared it with my mother, and my mom thought they were so funny that she bought a pair for my dad. So now Grandpa, has a pair of custom socks with his grandson's face on them. We definitely wore them together on Father's Day. Three generations just having a fun time with our matching socks.
That's a bonding moment. So if you're
They're
curious,
pretty hilarious.
Yeah, the company is called Divvy Up Socks, and you can find them at divvyupsocks.com. They didn't pay me to say that. I just really like the
But
socks.
if they want to be a sponsor, we're okay with that. So going on with the Father's Day, that was an awesome gift, the custom socks. My wife also, I thought, did a really nice job. She got me a set of children's books that were kind of dad-themed.
Aww.
So they're stories about a dad and a son. So she got me, I think, like 4 different books that I can read to my son, Noah, that are all kind of about dad and son relationships. That was really nice.
That's awesome.
So my son is just hit his 3-month birthday. I don't know, what do you want to call it?
Birth month?
Three month anniversary. Yeah. Anyway, we all know what we're talking about here. So my son just turned 3 months old yesterday, actually. And I've been spending a lot of time with him lately because I am taking some paternity leave, but I'm not always with him. And so I actually have a fantastic story about everyone's favorite subject when it comes to babies, poop. Everyone loves talking about poop. And we don't do it enough here on the show. I think we should probably do more. So my wife, courtesy of her, gave me this gem, and just so grateful that I wasn't in the room for this initial moment. So something that ends up happening with your kids very early on, I would say about the second month, maybe even a little bit before that, is they go from pooping several times a day to not pooping at all.
Yeah.
And then they go several days in between poops. So when they do end up pooping, it is the most explosive of poos. And it's a complete blowout, and by that, literally, I mean going out of the diaper and getting all over the clothing and whatever your kid is sitting on, car seats, couches, your own personal clothing. That's just great. So it goes everywhere, and it's become such a phenomenon now because we've been, it's been happening to us for a month or two now, that we just have a status for it where if we ever see it happening, we just shout, "Code Brown, Code Brown, Code Brown." And it's just an immediate reaction now where if one of us, my wife or I, shouts it, the other one just jumps into action to assist. We both go to the changing pad and we're all over it with wipes, trying to contain it because it's something you can't really contain. And the first time this happened recently with our son, We didn't know what to expect. We'd heard this happens, that they kind of go, a day or two without pooping, but we didn't know how bad it was going to be when it finally lets loose. And so my wonderful wife's at home by herself with our son when this first happens. And so she didn't know what was going to happen. She didn't know how to brace for impact or kind of plan this out. And so our normal protocol is if he poops, you kind of let him do that, and because sometimes he would poop maybe a second time right after it, kind of do like a chaining.
Chain poop is what I've heard
chain
you call
pooping
it
is what we tend to call it. So she's going off that old protocol, thinking that's the way to go. But she didn't realize this is a blowout. You do not want to wait for this. So she's waiting for the secondary poop to kick in, and he does go again, and it's a double blowout, double code brown, and for some reason, I can't understand this, based on the area involved here, we think it's going to go down, right? The butt is at the bottom. Somehow, it was so explosive, it starts going back up again. And it's coming around the front side and going up his shirt and just creating humongous stains all over his shirt. So I don't know how this is happening, and I don't know somewhere. The physics behind it. It doesn't seem like that's really possible. Just imagine like the ejection speed of a curves up the diaper and goes back up the front side.
Imagine, I guess, like a skateboarder on a half pipe. It's kind of,
the diaper's the half pipe and the poop. Yeah. All right. So before we carry too far with the fun poop metaphor, but my wife experiencing this for the first time, like it's such a phenomenon, she doesn't think I'm going to believe it, and she wants to get all the credit for handling it solo. So she sees it happening, opens up the diaper, realizes the problem, stops, runs back into the other room, grabs her phone so she can get photographic evidence of this, rushes back, takes a photo, sends it to me so that I will believe the story of what she's going through. And that's what parenting is about in the 21st century.
Yep. You got to get it. Do it for the gram.
Pixar never happened, and now I know it happens.
Yep. Oh my God. Yeah, we have had our share of those. We had a blowout yesterday, and so my son David is almost 8 months old now, and of course he's been on solid foods for a couple of months. And solid foods, dads, if your kid isn't there yet, and you think the poops are bad now, just like hold on to your butts, because it gets a whole lot
hold on
messier.
To their butts. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Or try to keep your hands off of their butts, because it's gonna get
gonna get everywhere. Yeah.
So the poop gets a lot thicker.
Oh, lovely.
And it ends up kind of looking like, I don't know, AstroTurf or something.
Beautiful. Oh gosh, the visuals.
So we had one of those yesterday. He's on this sort of combination, because you start combining the solid food, so it's like pears and apricots, or apples and peas, or something like that. And by the way, peas and brown rice so far has been the worst combination in terms of solid foods. Stinking and getting everywhere, and just being generally a nightmare. But we had to deal with that yesterday. It got everywhere. It got all over him. It got all over the changing mat. I usually have this system where I'll take the diaper off of him, I'll move it off to the side, and I'll use that to deposit the dirty baby wipes.
Very smart, same approach.
Exactly, you wipe as you go. And this one, it was such a mess, and it was so uncontained that I had to immediately trash the diaper before it could do any more damage. It was all about damage control at that point. And that onesie was, light a match and burn it at that
That's
point.
just mania right there.
Yeah,
but pay attention to that in case you're a dad and you don't have a good solid technique of how you handle the diapering. Like that's my preferred approach as well. Take the diaper off, leave it open off to the side, do your wipes, toss wipes in the diaper, and then roll the whole thing up and throw it away in one chunk. That's a solid strategy. If you have a problem like what you're talking about there, Jesse, where you can't even use the diaper, I've even just like taken a fresh wipe and laid it out as my new base.
That's a good idea.
And then thrown the dirty wipes on top of the clean wipe. I know it seems a little wasteful, but you're going to be wasting wipes anyway if it's like a super bad blowout.
Yeah.
But then you can at least have something that you can stack all the dirty crap up on and then just roll it back up again.
That's smart. Where were you yesterday?
I was taking care of my son with his blowout. That's what was going on.
That's true, yeah.
That's the funny stuff, but there's also some serious, not as fun stuff. Like something that just happened. This is a hot take. This is fresh news, breaking news for me. I was taking care of my son today, and I was trying to change out a onesie because he had peed on it. And so I got a fresh onesie out, and my son's head is slightly larger than normal. I would say he's in like the 75th percentile, is I think what we've been told. So it's slightly larger than normal. But I know the size. He's still kind of in the newborn phase. So I'm trying to put this onesie on over his head, and the worst possible thing that can happen when you're doing that, it did happen to me, where at the bottom of those onesies are the metal clasps that you're snapping together to close it up when you've got it on them. But before you have it on them and you're putting it over the head, those clasps are just kind of open and dragging. And so they scraped across my son's head and caused 2 little, red streaks across his head as I was trying to fit it on him. And I couldn't get it on him. It was too small. So that was my mistake. But gosh, I'm talking about feeling just awful. Like the son starts crying and you're just like, no, I'm so sorry. I'm a terrible dad. I didn't mean to do it. Like, oh my God. It's just the worst when like you unexpectedly hurt them.
Yeah.
And they don't understand, and you can't tell them, I'm sorry, it's an accident.
Yeah.
To them, it's just like pain out of nowhere.
Yeah. Can I make you feel better?
Yeah, please do.
I dropped my son last week.
Oh, great. So I'm a great dad.
Yeah,
Perfect.
exactly. In comparison, you are just
so much better than you. Perfect.
I was about to say Cliff Huxtable, but that's a terrible example in today's world. I don't know. You're Bob Saget, Full House.
Full House Bob Saget, not real life Bob Saget.
Yeah, Danny Tanner.
Perfect.
Yes. So to the story. So we're in Florida, and David is napping in his pack and play. Where we are in Florida, in this beach house we're staying at, they decided to, instead of mattresses, just use, I don't know, some kind of plywood sort of level of hardness is what I was sleeping on.
Goodness.
So I was experiencing back pains just out the wazoo. And David's napping. He's waking up from a nap, and I bend into the pack and play to pick him up, and my back locks up.
Yep.
Lower back pain. And I get him, I scoop him up in my arms, and as I'm halfway out of the pack and play, maybe a foot off the ground, he flips. In frustration and protest, he flips out of my arms, and I clutch him and grab him again, and then he flips again, and I completely lose my grip on him.
Oh, jeez.
Luckily, he fell into the pack and play, which has a soft padded mattress at the bottom.
Yeah, nice. Lands on the cushion at least.
Exactly.
Oh, boy.
So he's not hurt at all. He is scared out of his mind because this has never happened to him before. And, of course, it's never happened to me before. So
right.
I
You're scared.
Exactly. I scream. The family comes running in. What's going on? I drop David. Oh, my God. Is he okay? He's okay. He's just screaming because he's scared. And
sure.
I hand him off to the mama. And let him calm down, and I go off to calm down myself because I'm shaking at that point. And,
oh man,
and it turned out in the end he was okay. Right. I know that I'm not the first dad in the world to have dropped a child, and it could have gone so much worse. And I was dropped several times as a child myself.
And that's how you are the way you are.
Yeah, well,
okay,
don't say that. 'Cause now I think he's going to turn out like me, and now I feel bad all over again.
But look
Thanks
at you.
for
You have a
reopening the
fantastic podcast.
Hey!
You're so famous. Oh my God, you should aspire to be this great.
I'm having trouble detecting how much of that was sarcastic.
No, I'm being serious because I'm part of this with you. I mean, so aside from all of that, how was the rest of your trip, Jesse?
Aside from all of that, it was a cakewalk. So, like I mentioned earlier, my wife fell and broke her knee. But just to give you kind of a visual, that turned what would have been enough of a challenge, which is traveling with a baby.
Yep.
And a dog, because we've got a small dog. Into traveling with a baby, a small dog, and an injured adult. So you're down to one able-bodied parent.
And that's you.
Exactly, to kind of handle the physical burden, which is not to say that my wife was out of the picture. I mean, she was still shouldering the majority of, the feeding and keeping David kind of occupied and comfortable and throughout the trip just being with him.
Right.
But it definitely made it a little harder, packing and unpacking. And so traveling with a baby is a chore enough of its own. It's an adventure. When you're going on long trips with a kid, one thing that I want to recommend to anyone who's planning on doing this is start before daylight or after the sun has gone down. And when I say that, it's like not some kind of allusion to Gremlins or something like that. It's because when your kid is asleep, he's going to go longer without needing to eat. That kind of thing. Unless he's so young that he's still waking up every 3 hours or so to eat.
Yeah.
So when we left for our trip to go to Florida, we left at about 6 in the morning before sunrise. David slept really until like 11 o'clock until we got into Florida, basically. And then he woke up and started getting a little fussy. So we stopped kind of halfway through once to feed him. But really it was us kind of waking him up to feed him just because he was starting to get he was stirring a little bit and we just knew it was time.
Right.
But there were no meltdowns. There was no crying, none of that. Hey, I'm bored. What's going on? Occupy me, that kind of thing on the way down. We made the mistake on the way back of leaving during the daylight hours when he was wide awake. So he's fine for the first half of the trip. And then halfway through Alabama, he starts crying and screaming his head off.
Oh, boy.
So that added about an hour to our trip in terms of every few miles, stopping, pulling off to the side of the road, giving him a diaper change, seeing if that helps,
Right.
giving him his toys, stopping to feed him, finding a parking lot where we can kind of park in the corner where, no one's like staring at us and putting him up to the front seat. By, I guess, 7:00 in the evening, we're getting, into Georgia and we are at our wits' end because he's screaming his head off. And as soon as we stop the car and pay attention to him, he's fine. He's happy.
Right.
And then as soon as the car starts again, he is just nuts. Just right back at it again. And at that point, we're like, God, I mean, what do we do? Can we just carry him in the front seat with us? And eventually, we're like, no, we can't do that. We're on the interstate. It's just way too dangerous.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
even if something small happened, we get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
So we just had to let him cry it out. And then, of course, he stops crying 10 minutes before the end of the trip.
Oh, perfect.
You know what I mean?
Perfect.
So we get 3 hours of meltdown and then 10 minutes of sleep, and then we're home.
Yeah, that's like your reward, right? Yeah, I wonder because I think about this sometimes, not even for like a big travel, but like if I'm going on like a 30-minute car ride or an hour car ride, or if I'm going somewhere and I have to be somewhere and my son's not ready to be going anywhere and he's fussy already, thinking about having like one of us, myself or my wife, like sit in the back seat next to him. Did you guys try that?
We couldn't because of Ashley's knee. She
Oh,
couldn't.
yeah.
That was the problem.
Okay.
If she was fine, we would have just put her in the back seat the whole time.
Yeah,
to
sure.
kind of keep him busy. But because of
Had to be laid
her
up.
broken knee,
Yeah.
exactly. She had to be in the front seat, kind of
Jeez.
pulled all the way back. So yeah, and the future trips, I would say, if it's just you and your spouse and the baby, put whoever's not driving, put them in the back seat next to the car seat so that they can kind of keep him busy.
Be on damage control,
And even then, you can maybe feed him some solid foods on the road without taking him out of the car seat, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
or bottle feed him or something
sometimes
like
the
that.
attention is just for whatever reason they need to be looked at.
Yep. All right, we'll get back on track.
We'll circle back.
Exactly. All of that was just to say, if you're planning a trip with a small child, especially an infant, be prepared. Do what you can to kind of make sure you've got stuff going on to keep him occupied. Otherwise, your trip is
only
going to
go so well on the travel part.
Yep.
But I think we could probably spend an entire episode talking about traveling.
Oh, yeah.
With a kid,
we'll come back to
because
that
I think
sometime.
that'd be a good thing to delve into.
Yeah.
But instead, let's talk about this week's topic. So this week, we're going to be talking all about dating and trying to be a couple after having a kid.
Yep.
So before we have your kids, you've only experienced being a couple. You were dating, you got engaged, you get married, whatever. I mean, we're making an assumption here, but just to be straight up, both of us are married and we've been with our wives for several years before we had kids. So that's just our experience. But we had a way that we used to live, really, and we kind of had what I kind of feel is like the identity of being a couple, and now we're changing to being parents.
Yep.
So we talk a lot about on this podcast about the parenting side of things, but today we also want to talk about the couple side of things. What's that like for us?
Oh yeah. Because I mean, it's so like in the life cycle of, at least for guys and guys like us, I can really speak for myself, but you start off as a single person, worried about just you, and you're occupied with that.
Yep.
And then you find someone, you become a couple, and then your lives become, you and this other person, and then you adapt to that.
Yep.
And then you're fine with that, and then that's normal. And then the kid comes along, and it becomes a balancing act. You know what I mean? Because on the one hand, you've got to pour a lot of energy and attention into taking care of that kid. And then also, of course, there's the emotional connection. Like, that becomes a huge part of your life. But if you pour all of your energy into that to the neglect of the spouse, you're going to run into problems. And that is something that happens to so many people. And that's not to say that we've got an answer for it. I mean, we've just been doing this for a few months and we don't have all the answers yet. But, it's definitely worth paying attention to, because there are things you can do. And then there are some things that you're just going to have to adapt to. And the important thing, I think, is just to keep an eye on it.
Yeah. And really the thing that we want to bring up is just how we've started to try to handle it, give you a vibe on, our first experiences of going on dates post-kid.
Yep.
So for my wife, Austin, and I, for example, our first date was pretty soon actually after, because we've been thinking about that and thinking about, we got to make sure we're still a couple. So like a couple of weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks in. I know it sounds really early, but, those first couple of weeks are just the worst. Like, not in a bad, like, oh, you hate it, but more just like the lack of sleep,
Yeah.
the lack of doing anything or feeling like a human.
Right.
So we wanted to try to do something human-like, and for us that meant like going out to eat or something. So our first big date was going to just be something kind of simple. We wanted to make it easy so that we could do it, feel like we got out, but we also were like really nervous and anxious about leaving our son.
Yep.
And my wife even more so than me, the maternal connection being super strong those first couple of weeks in.
Oh yeah.
So we tried to set it up as best we could. So we had our family babysitting for us, so we knew the person we were leaving it with, like no concerns there, and we picked a restaurant that we liked but was very close to our house, so it'd be a very quick trip back and forth. We made a reservation so we wouldn't have any trouble with that. We made it very early in the day so we wouldn't have any trouble getting in.
Yeah.
And so we could come back and be home pretty early. So we tried to set it up nice and easy. I definitely recommend. But of course, what immediately starts happening is as soon as you try to leave, you realize, oh crap, I'm about to leave my kid. And a whole wave of emotions comes in. So we entered into a 20-minute plus goodbye sequence where the parents come over, we kind of talk about leaving, and you start to get emotional, and you're starting to think about like, oh my God, I can't believe we're actually doing this. Why are we doing this? And then you talk for about 10 minutes about, do we actually want to leave our kid?
Yeah.
And so a lot of it just starts out being, are we even going to do this?
Yeah.
Are we even going to go through it? The first time is the hardest time for this reason. And then we finally actually did leave the house. I say the house because we didn't actually leave the property. We got into the vehicle, and then we sat there for about another 10 minutes, and very emotional. Like we're actually crying in the car in our driveway with our son like 5 feet away from us. But like we've left him now, and it's like that's the emotion is welling up in us. And so we finally do leave, but it was the fastest date of our lives, faster than our first date or any like terrible dates we might have had. We were gone for I think a combined 45 minutes, and that includes driving to and from the restaurant, parking, getting the table, chit chat with waiter, whatever it is. And we ate. I promise we did, and we did everything, but we just couldn't stay. We wanted to come back, and so the first experience for us was not much of one, but at the end of the day, it started the process, and so it made it a little. And it's always going to make it easier to do the next couple of dates.
Yeah. And everyone's situation is different. If you've got folks around that can watch the kid, like we highly recommend getting out of the house with just you and your partner. Get some one-on-one time like you guys used to have. So it's a little harder for us. We don't have family anywhere near us, so it's kind of hard to find a sitter sometimes. So what we started doing on our first few weeks was we figured out kind of when we could go out with David without him waking up and fussing. And he was actually pretty good. Like, he was an unusually quiet child. He would sleep most of the time, but when he woke up, he wouldn't really cry. He's been great in public so far. So we have a favorite coffee shop in where we live in Cumming called Rendezvous Cafe. And we go there. I mean, we're there twice a week, even if it's just me picking up a to-go order to bring it back to the house. So we would start going there to have coffee dates, and we would bring David along and just leave him in his car seat with the drape kind of, the mesh kind of down, so it'd be nice and dark in his little pod there, and he would sleep the whole time. We would actually take our time, sip our coffee, and then we had the stroller with us, so we might go from there to do some grocery shopping, and that kind of helped put us back. It was almost like a normal date night before the kid, except that the kid happened to be there.
Nice.
Although he was an inanimate object at that point. Now he's older. He's more active, even if he's not crying in public. So it's a little harder for us to all get out there and do stuff. Sometimes, I mean, for us, even a Target trip, at 8 or 9 o'clock at night when he's falling asleep anyway, so he's a little bit less, active, is kind of, to me, it kind of feels like a throwback to us, just the two of us going to Target, except we've got the kid in the car seat, not in the car seat, but in the, in the stroller and the child portion of it. and I'm kind of keeping him occupied while Ashley's looking at diapers and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Every time you're with your kid, I like the concept of like kind of unconscious time almost. I've never thought about that. That's pretty smart. But yeah, doing an activity with your kid it's completely just different. Even if everything about it is the same, because one of you is gonna at all times have to be checking out with the child, and so you kind of immediately go into the split up mode where like one of you focuses on the task, the other focuses on the baby.
Yeah,
whatever it is. So yeah, that's just a really interesting idea, to kind of like have them be in their little environment where they're asleep and they don't know that they're on the date with you.
Yeah. Well, and so sans David, the two of us have gone out together maybe really just twice since he's been around.
Oh wow.
But it's been movie nights, and it's been less about the quantity time and more about the quality of the time. So we went out and saw Avengers when it came out in theaters.
Nice.
Then we went out it was either the next day or the next week when my mother-in-law was staying with us, and went out and saw Deadpool 2.
There you go.
So, we're getting our dose of quality time together. It's a movie night. It feels like, our first few dates were movies, so it feels kind of like going back to that. And then it's also the kind of movies that we enjoy seeing. And it's like the R-rated stuff that we're not going to get to enjoy once he gets old enough to go to the movies with us.
For sure.
So, trying to get that in while we can. And we're going to do that again this weekend. This weekend is actually our 6th anniversary.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And it depends on how my wife feels with her knee, being in recovery there, whether it's going to be more of a normal anniversary of going out to dinner and doing something, or whether she's going to be immobile and me, cooking a nice dinner at home or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
But if we get the opportunity, we're going to leave the kid, with the grandparents and go out and see Solo. But we're really excited about that if it ends up happening.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's the other thing is like you have to sort of accept the chaos of having a kid and how that affects your chances of actually completing the plans that you set out. They say that man makes a plan and God laughs. Well, man makes a plan and baby laughs, or cries,
or
has a
or
blowout,
poops, or something like that,
or has a meltdown, that kind of thing. Because for all we know, we could get to Saturday night and he is just in the worst mood possible, and we just can't leave him with the grandparents.
You never know.
So we'll wait and see. But if it all goes well, we'll have a nice dinner and have a date night. If last night was any preview of that, it's going to be interesting because last night we handed off David to his Lolly, which is Ashley's mother, the grandmother, for the night, and he is down in Fayetteville, Georgia, with her and with my mom for the day, and that was our first overnight completely without a baby.
Yeah.
And it was an emotional roller coaster.
No doubt. No doubt.
Mostly just a downhill roller coaster. Less of a roller coaster and more of just a car
gets worse and worse
and
worse and worse. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it was a gut punch for Ashley. I mean, she was missing him like crazy. At one point, she was like, I want you to drive down there right now and bring him back. And the reason we handed him off was because, my wife with a broken knee, there's not much she can do by herself around the house to take care of the kid. So some days we have family members coming up and staying with her. Some days he's just being babysat by the grandparents so that Ashley can be home alone because I can't be home with her every day either. Yeah. But that was rough, and hey, at this point, though, it can only get better. The more you do it, the more you get used to it. So if you're afraid to leave the kid with someone else for the night, not just dip your toe in, but jump into the shallow end and do it. It will be hard the first time for both parents. It will just get easier after that.
For sure. And I think that's about the only thing I can, say from our experience right now is just that it is going to suck the first time. And if you're, for the dads out there, when you're talking with your wives, your partners, be thinking about that, when your wife is like, oh, do we have to do it? Like, oh, I don't want to leave him. Like, be supportive. You don't want to be separated from your son either, or your child either, hopefully. But, acknowledge that. But at the same time, be encouraging to kind of go through with it. Yeah. Don't be forceful about it. Don't be a dick about it. But yeah, at the end of the day, you both hopefully know subconsciously that once you've started the process, it's going to feel more normal. Yeah. And you're going to enjoy yourselves at the end of the day. And that's what we kind of want for ourselves as dads, and that's what we want for every other dad out there, and the moms too. You need to enjoy yourselves.
Yeah. So we kind of surveyed our parents about their experience, kind of not rekindling, but, getting back out there in terms of date nights after having babies. And I talked to my mom today, and it was what ended up happening was they would just take me and my brother, who were a year and a half apart, so we were toddlers at the same time.
Yep.
They would, half the time, they would just take us with them, and then the other half, they would leave us with my grandmother, and they would go out. But the thing is, they would just end up talking about us the whole time. Because,
of course.
I mean, like all good parents, you're obsessed. And she said, it was tough, but they did it. And with the support of their family, they would kind of branch out and do it more and more until it kind of became normal.
Right, until they got to a point where, they just knew, hey, we're going to have this time for ourselves and not be too worried about like, oh, are we terrible parents or something?
Exactly.
Like, you're not terrible parents. If you want to be good parents, you want to be having a healthy relationship. That's kind of what we're getting at today. This is really about the couple side of thing. You need to care about that relationship as much as you care about the parent relationship. And you're not going to be able to do good at one if you're suffering on the other end of the spectrum. And so, funny story from my parents' side, actually not my parents, my wife's parents had a kind of a funny approach to it. And, keeping in mind that this was, let's say, 20-ish years ago, that they were dealing with my wife as a child. And so the way that they would handle it is, it's actually kind of interesting of what you're describing earlier, Jesse. They didn't have any family nearby either.
Yeah.
So they couldn't drop a kid off with a parent or a family member.
Right.
So babysitting was an option, but they didn't have a lot of money at the time. One of them was still in school trying to get, a doctorate. So there's even less money going around and less free time.
Right.
And so they would do kind of what you were talking about. They would try to find ways to sneak in a date with the kids present, but make it so that the kids were not the nuisance, or what could they do to kind of essentially squeeze that date night in. And so they had a very elaborate plan that they would enact. So when they had a date night, they would plan it to a T so it would go off all cylinders firing and they could have as much of a real experience as possible. So they had one particular restaurant that they would always go to. It was the spot they had, and they would develop this plan to key it off where they would park a car out front of the restaurant early in the day so they could seal the spot, basically, and know that when they come through at the end of the night, they have prime parking right in front of the restaurant. And basically, they would then reserve a table at the restaurant right in front of the parking spot. So they would be as close as possible to said car while they're sitting at their table. So when it comes time for the date, they would drive around leading up to the reservation time so the kids get nice and tired in the car. So they use the motion of the car to their advantage at this point. Knock the kids out, basically, from driving. So get them to that unconscious state that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then they would leave the kids in the car. Don't freak out too much, everyone, but they would leave the kids in the car, windows rolled down, and they would sit at that table that's right outside of the car, so they're 5 feet away at the specifically reserved table with the specifically reserved parking spot that they finagled for themselves, so they're right next to the kids. The kids are asleep, but they then get to have their date. They get to have their dinner. Kids are right there just in case anything happens, but they're having the dinner. And this is what the levels of elaborate that you have to go to as a parent to kind of make things happen. And especially on the extreme end, if you don't have family nearby, I'm not advocating leaving your kids in the car, but I'm just saying, like, you got to do some things. You got to take care of that relationship in some way.
Yeah, you got to get creative with it.
So circling back to the general theme here and thinking about the ways of being a couple, I mean, it's one of the bigger challenges. Like, you want to go right into parenting mode, and a lot of the parenting mode is a two-person task. Like, it's great that you have, your spouse with you because you kind of need that. I mean, doing it single parent style, I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, like, massive props to single parents out there. Being a parent now and not being a single parent, all I can say is holy cow. Like, amazing work, anyone who's a single parent. I can't relate to you. I just can relate enough to know that it's even harder for you than it would be for us. So good on you. But trying to be a parent, you go right into parent mode and you do everything parent-centric. So it's all kid-centric. Every thought, everything you're doing is all about who's watching him or her, when, who's picking him up, who's doing X, Y, Z with a child, and every thought is kind of focused around that. And if you take like a break, like for me on a regular day, a break right now that we have a son, is just like, oh, my wife's home and I'm home at the same time. Okay, I need to go to the bathroom. She can watch him, and that's the mental relief that I get for the day, is like a few minutes to do something that I need to do, or the laundry, or mowing the lawn, or whatever it is. it's nice to have the capacity to do that. That's about as exciting as it gets on a day-to-day level.
Yeah.
for me. So thinking about how you also put some time into being a couple is probably the most challenging. We talked a lot about doing those dates, trying to make time for it. And really, it might be easier for the dads in this situation as it kind of is for other things. So, we're pretty lucky in some regards. But, the moms, they have probably the stronger connection maybe, especially if we're talking early on in the relationship. If breastfeeding is still going on, there's a very deep bond with that. So just be empathetic at the end of the day, dads. Be cognizant of that. Try to plan these dates more. I don't know if you were always the planner before, Jesse, for dates, or if you shared it.
It was a little 50-50.
Yeah, 50-50 is fine. That's great. But, for the dads, like, try to be more on the 75-25 side of things.
Yeah.
Like, make sure that you're letting the dates happen, saying like, hey, honey, we're going to go out on Saturday, right? Kind of throwing that out there early on in the week. Make sure it gets set up with a babysitter or a family member or whoever. Kind of take a little bit more of the onus on there because that'll just help it feel more normal, I would say.
And don't wait too long to jump into the pool either. The longer you wait, really, honestly, the harder it's going to be. Start making that sort of transition into leaving the kid with a trusted adult and going out and doing your own thing early on. Because if you wait too long, it's, like I said, it's just going to get harder and harder. I mean, it never really gets easier.
No, never.
And like Brandon said, go easy on your wife because it is going to be an emotional gut punch. I've said this before, but to the mom, your child is something that was a short time ago closer to you than any living thing could be, being inside you.
True.
And then gradually over time, it just gets further and further away from you. Then it's in the bassinet, then it's in the crib in another room.
Right.
And before long, it's going to be going to preschool and daycare then to school and then off to college and then off to the other side of the world.
Stop it, you maniac. Stop it.
I know. But she may feel like she's sort of fighting a losing battle in terms of losing that closeness that really we have no way of ever understanding until science comes up with a way to impregnate men. So go easy on her. Let her, if she's got to cry it out, let her cry it out. Be supportive and be for, whatever that means for her. Don't, if a pat on the back is what she needs, give it to her. If it's a nice tight hug, if it's just giving her space, sometimes that's what she wants more than anything else is just space and time to kind of express how she's feeling and not to, I've made the mistake of trying to throw in some logic and reason, oh, honey, it's okay. He's just with your mom. He's, we're going to see him 12. And the response there is, I don't need that right now. Don't tell me what I already know. Because then you risk condescending, right? You risk the term mansplaining, from which we got the term dadsplaining.
Yeah.
You risk telling her something that she already knows. It's not the knowledge that's going to help her. It's just an emotional tug that she feels right now, and she's just got to get out of her system. And then you guys can go out and do your thing and be a couple. So, sensitivity, to quote Otis Redding, try a little tenderness.
Nice. Yeah, be there to push a little bit, to nudge a little bit to like doing it. Don't let it not happen.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And Jesse hit it on the head that like it doesn't get easier, it only gets harder.
Yeah.
The longer you wait, but not only does it get harder for the separation of, leaving your kid for a little period of time, but it's also just going to get harder on the relationship. You're going to stop forgetting, you're gonna forget how to be a couple almost. No, not completely, right? Like it's not doom and gloom. There's not a ticking time bomb necessarily, but the longer you wait, the harder it's gonna get on you leaving your child, but also just on you as a couple. You need to get back in the groove and remember what it feels like to go on a date night. Going on dates when you're married, you probably can understand where I'm coming from. That felt different than going on dates when you weren't married.
Yeah.
It's just a different mood and a different vibe. So when you get married, you kind of have to get used to what it's like going on a date as a married couple.
Yeah.
You don't have to wonder, like, are you going to be together? You don't have to do any of that kind of stuff, which is nice. But it's just different at the same time.
Well, because you're also a partnership. You're also, you're on the date, but in the back of your mind, you're thinking, okay, well, we can't forget to pay the bills. We can't forget to set the trash out this week it's domesticated. There's the domesticated stuff that you as a team have to worry about. That is on your mind while you're out having a date. Because at that point, having a date is less about wooing that person and really just about growing closer to that person as a
spending time together, kind of being
daily life.
Being a twosome that's kind of almost like one combined entity, if you will. So that same kind of feeling, I think, repeats itself over now when you're a parent. It's the same thing. You need to get familiar with what it's like dating as parents, but you're still a couple, and that's going to be different than just being a couple, as it was different than dating. And there's different challenges, but it's the same kind of, I think, experience where you've got to do it, and you've got to get used to being a couple who also is parents.
Yep. And like we've said before, you're going to make mistakes. Your spouse is going to make mistakes. Go easy on yourselves. Go easy on each other. That's the only way you're going to get through this. Don't be too hard on yourselves. Roll with the punches. You are going to forget an important date. You're going to forget her birthday. You're going to forget that you've got an anniversary coming up. You're going to forget that you guys made plans, and then you get up to it, and it's too late to make those plans come true. Do your best. And then go easy on yourselves because you've got baby brain and you're going to have it for a very long time.
Yeah, but you've got to do these things because you don't want what you forget is to be a couple.
Exactly.
You don't want to forget to take care of yourselves in your relationship with your spouse and like forgetting to go on dates. Like you might think everything's fine because you're just always together as a family, and that never sounds bad.
Right.
And if you're happy doing that, that's great. And it's not that you're doing anything wrong, but you need to have some of that time as a couple, and frankly, some time away from your child at a certain point. You need some of that as well.
Yep.
And if I can provide any hope to you, it's that it will be fun. It will be fun to go do things again and to go out and do activities. Like Jesse gave that great example of seeing, like R-rated movies. Like you can't do that with a child, and they're going to be 17 years away from doing that. So you need to, you want to see those movies. You don't want to wait until they're old enough to go do it. You need to do it. And
I'm so bummed that I'm going to miss Deadpool's 4 through 8. You know what I mean?
But you can see Incredibles 2 through 10. And by the
true.
way, I'm excited to see that. I haven't seen it yet, but I really want to see it.
Yeah.
And it's something that my wife and I just did. We just went on like a really nice date, the two of us, for Father's Day. She let me pick the restaurant, and I picked an amazing steak restaurant, and we had an incredible meal. Like I can't tell you, it was one of the best meals we've had in a long, long, long time. And you can't do that with a kid. Yeah. You can't go to the cool, trendy place. So like there's light at the end of this tunnel. You got to go through it, and there's something on the other side that's worth it.
Yep. Yeah, it's all about, as the wise Mufasa once said, remember who you are.
Wow. Dropping knowledge bombs today.
And with that, I think we will call it a day for episode 7 of the Dadsplaining podcast. Once again, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting app. And if you haven't already, give us a nice rating and review if you like what you hear, so that we can connect with others and keep on sharing these crazy stories.
All right, and be sure to check us out on social media. Check us out on Facebook at Dadsplaining Podcast. Please give us a like there so you can stay in touch as we post episodes. You can also follow us on Twitter at Dadsplaining Pod.
And hey, if you've got a fun story, if you just got a question that's been on your mind and you don't know who else to ask us. You can write us at dadsplainingpodcast@gmail.com. We check this inbox every week before we start the podcast, so if we like what you have to say, you might just hear your story here on the podcast. So until next time,
I'm Brandon.
And I'm Jesse. And hey, Brandon, I will sell you a wig for $5. What do you say?
Oh, man, no.
Oh, come on. It's a small price to pay. Thanks. I'll be here all week. All right. Thanks for listening.